to you.
Good morning, Your Honors.
Good morning. Good morning. Unit 2 is how did the framers create the Constitution? And before I give you the question, I'd appreciate if you'd introduce yourself, even though this is the second time for Cooper, but go ahead.
My name is Marlene, and with my teammates Cooper and Ezra, we'll be addressing the question for Unit 2.
Okay, thank you very much. And your question is, why did the founders choose to establish a representative democracy rather than a pure or direct version of democracy? And there's two subparts to that question. What are the advantages and disadvantages of representative democracy or direct democracy? And the second subpart is, some people contend that instead of representing states or other geographic areas, representatives should reflect social, economic, or ethnic groups, and perhaps even gender groupings. Do you agree or disagree with this? And tell us why. You may begin.
When the Founding Fathers wrote the Constitution, they did not advocate mob rule. They established a representative democracy as opposed to a direct democracy because they did not trust rule by the masses, and they feared that a direct democracy could not adequately protect the wealth of its citizens. Alexander Hamilton and John Jay, two influential New York Federalists, made their stances on the issue clear. Hamilton supported a government run by the rich, well-born, and able. Jay advocated the people who own the country ought to govern it.
A representative democracy is the only feasible option for America. With a population well over 300 million, there are simply too many people to allow each citizen to legislate. Passing laws is a vital function of government. However, as a legislative matter, every American cannot vote on each law, because with tens of thousands of laws being proposed annually, there are simply too many laws to allow each citizen to vote on them. In New York State alone, more than 12,000 laws are proposed each year. In a representative democracy, the people are the ultimate check, for politicians will not want to do something contrary to the wishes of the sovereign people if it means that they will not be reelected. Representative government also helps prevent faction rule.
And yet representative democracies have many disadvantages. In Democracy in America, Alexis de Tocqueville notes that the views of constituents in the minority are frequently not being heard. Representative democracy can even stifle debate, for constituents may feel that because they have a representative who will figure things out for them, they do not need to formulate their own opinions.
A direct democracy has certain advantages. The American political system is based on popular sovereignty, or the principle that a government's power comes from the people. The quintessential example of a government deriving its power from the sovereign people would be to have, as Lincoln said, a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. The nature of a direct democracy allows people to have a say, and this ability is crucial when considering policies such as taxation that affect the entire nation.
And direct democracy is not without its disadvantages. The Constitution was designed to create a government by the educated and the informed, not by the masses. To institute a direct democracy would be to advocate mobocracy. The poor majority may oppress the wealthy minority. And additionally, with a population exceeding 300 million, America could not give every citizen direct access to the government and still function efficiently. Due to political apathy, even if it was possible to allow every American to be governed, many citizens would not want to do so. Worse, an apathetic electorate could lead to institutions such as Tammany Hall, which engaged in bribery.
I disagree with the proposed concept. In order to best represent the people, districts should represent social, economic, or ethnic groups. Political campaigns spend millions upon millions of dollars zeroing in on correlations between where people live and their political affiliations. If the district was a reflection of a social, economic, or ethnic special interest, then less money would be spent on the campaign process. This could open up political candidacy for people who are less affluent.
I respectfully disagree with my colleague. If the proposed plan was enacted, the American political system would be irreparably fragmented and government by faction would ensue. In Federalist 10, Madison defines faction as a number, whole, who are united and actuated by some common impulse of passion or of interest adverse to the rights of other citizens. The views of one social, economic, or ethnic group does not represent the views of the entire nation. Additionally, factional disunity was the chief factor for the assassination of President Garfield. Although a representative democracy based on geographic districts is a flawed institution, it remains to be the most effective form of modern government today. Thank you, Your Honors. We'll now take the questions.
Sure. In Federalist 10, Madison argues that faction is part of the very nature of man, and that a republic is better than a pure democracy for combating major factions. How serious is the problem of faction or majority tyranny today, what evidence can you offer to support your response?
I don't believe factions are a serious problem today. While they do slow down the political process, I think that was the intention of the Founding Fathers, for all of the options to be considered and everyone's voice to be heard. An example of this is the amount of checks and to the degree to which checks and balances are integrated into the Constitution. They're such a large part of such an important document so that no power is not narrowed into the grasp of few, and this halts the progression of majority tyranny.
To add to what my colleague has said, Congress is such a large body with 535 members as opposed to the executive branch, which has just one president, which is just the president, that it was designed to get every side of the issue discussed.
I'd like to disagree with my colleagues. I believe that faction rule is a very serious problem today. An example of this would be just recently Kirsten Gillibrand backed a bill in Congress advocating for free health care benefits for first responders to 9/11 who had been damaged by inhalation problems from debris. This bill was filibustered by the GOP and never came to pass. This is an example of one of those instances in which faction rule can take away from what may be best for the majority of people.
In Federalist 51, James Madison argues that, quote, dependence on the people is no doubt the primary control of government. But experience has taught mankind the necessity of auxiliary precautions. What are auxiliary precautions, and where can they be found in the Constitution, and how effective have they proven to be?
Auxiliary precautions are the checks and balances and separation of powers that are woven into the Constitution. They're found in Articles 1, 2, and 3. An example of a check would be the president has the power to veto a bill proposed by Congress. That's a check on the legislative branch by the executive. And an example of this is President George W. Bush in 2006 vetoed a proposition to ease the restriction on stem cell research.
What specific limits does the Constitution place on the powers of the legislature, and should additional limits be added? If so, what additional measures would you recommend?
Powers placed on the legislature are they cannot pass bills of attainder or ex post facto law, and they cannot suspend the writ of habeas corpus unless in times of rebellion or invasion.
The legislative branch is also limited by judicial review because they're not limited in passing laws, but once the laws are passed and if they come before the judiciary has the power to declare them unconstitutional. And this is an important limit on the legislature because it binds the legislature to the Constitution and to the Bill of Rights.
To add to what my colleagues have said, the Congress is prohibited by the Bill of Rights from abridging certain aspects of certain rights, such as people's freedom of speech, religion, and their right to assemble and petition the government for a redress of grievances.
An example of this would be Congress passed an anti-flag burning law quite a while ago, and we went to the judiciary, and the judiciary said that it was unconstitutional under the First Amendment, and that's one of the ways in which the legislature can be held to the principles in the Bill of Rights.
Another question for you is, why did the framers decide to divide Congress into two houses? And what might be arguments for and against continuing to divide Congress today?
It was decided to divide Congress into two houses based on the New Jersey plan and the Virginia plan. New Jersey was a small state and advocated for equal representation. Virginia was a larger state and felt that it should be based on population, and considering they were larger, they felt they should be compensated for. Together they formed the Connecticut Compromise, which now makes Congress a bicameral legislature. So the Senate, each state has 2 senators regardless of size, and the House of Representatives is based on the state's population.
To add to what my colleague has said, when the founders created the Senate, it was senators were elected not by the people, but by the state legislatures, because they wanted to take as much power as possible out of the direct hands of the people, because they did not trust rule by the masses.
The reason why Congress continues to be separated today is because the way the Constitution was set up, the legislative branch was the most powerful. They split the legislative branch in order to allow it to sort of check itself. And we continue to keep this check there because it's very important to the function of the legislature.
Time.
Thank you.
Saved by the bell.
Another great performance here. I think this group even took it a step further with playing off one another, and you even did that not only in your prepared statements but in your responses to the questions. You did an excellent job sort of ceding to the next person and not, I know it's hard in this short format, you want to go on and really make your point, but you understand that the person next to you has a point to make as well. You did a great job doing that, and transitioning into the next person's comments. Great job.
Again, the poise and the teamwork were excellent. Very thoughtful responses. I like the fact that in both the main question and in some of the follow-ups that you felt free to take positions opposing each other. And I thought that was a great way of presenting the arguments on both sides, because as you can learn in your study, the Constitution and everything that went with it was the product of hard-fought, well-reasoned debate on both sides of the issue. And I think that being able to show the same thing in answering our questions shows the real grasp of government, how it was formed, how our founders thought, and how things are applied today. I think one thought that I had, I was listening to the answer on the faction issue. One thing you might consider if you were discussing this further would be just to discuss what the whole role and impact of the Tea Party movement has been over the last couple of years. I mean, that certainly blends into the factionalism, and it's quite a hot topic, and there are hot views on both sides, but it might be one other factual thing that you could bring in. Otherwise, my thought is very, very well done. Mary?
John stole my thunder.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize.
I was going to comment on how you respectfully disagreed with your colleagues when you responded both to the 4-minute prepared statement and to the follow-up questions. And that's perfectly acceptable. And actually, as far as I'm concerned, encouraged, because if we all think the same way, we're all just sort of automatons, and we move on to government and we just agree with whoever's in power, and that's not necessarily to anyone's benefit. So, good job.
And last but not least, I agree. I also think that the more current and present day examples that you can infuse into your responses, and you did that with the reference to Gillibrand's issue, I think it is important. Talking today also about what happens when third-party results affect the national election, and talking about how does that affect Congress, talking about gridlock in Congress today, and whether the examples that you could bring into your discussion. I think you do that well. And I also like the format where you go back and forth with I agree and I disagree, and for these reasons I do that. Nice job. Thank you.
Thank you.